1881. A classroom vanished. Its lessons kept answering roll. They took attendance as if it held the prairie together. In April 1881, the district number 4 Schoolhouse sat alone on a rise of buffalo grass and nailheads, a rectangle of painted boards with a bell small as a teacup and proud as a judge. Miss Eliza Hart kept the register in a sloping hand. Weather, visitors, absences, calving, measles, river too high, and the day's copy sentence. Work learns its own alphabet. Children hung lunch pails on pegs, stowed slates, and repeated counties like a prayer that had become reasonable. Chalk dust lifted when anyone laughed. At 4, she rang dismissal and wrote tomorrow's date on the board to save time from forgetting. A cloud shelf to the northwest stacked itself like crockery. Wind nosed the door and discovered manners. A boy named Amos stayed late to fill the coal scuttle. He drew a doodle in the margin of the arithmetic, a box with a window and a smoke line. "Home," he said, embarrassed by accuracy. Eliza locked the door, tugged the sill to see if winter had loosened it, and ran her fingers over the bell rope until they squeaked. She left the register face down, the pointer leaning against the primer stack, and the maps rolled neat as Sunday trousers. On the way down the path, she turned once and saw the windows show the sky back correctly, a trick buildings learn when no one is inside. Night came in a single color. Across the section, a lantern walked a fence line and stopped, as if surprised to be holding light. The wind pressed its palm on the grass, and then lifted it again. Coyotes tuned. The bell rope swayed once inside a locked room. The attendance line for the day, 23, dried with a curl where the ink had thought of running and decided against it. The schoolhouse waited, square and decided, for a morning that did not arrive. Morning came to everything but the school. The path climbed the rise and found a shape missing as cleanly as if a careful eraser had passed. The foundation stones remained, 4 rectangles of limestone, corners chalked by frost, but between them lay only matted grass, a rectangle of yellow where boards had argued with sun. The bell rope dangled from nothing, its frayed end dark, as if soot had learned to braid. The cast iron stove sat on its 4 feet in the open air, warm enough to make a palm doubt itself. Beside it, the poker pointed at a circle in ash where no fire burned. Miss Hart reached for the latch that was not there and touched air that felt like the back of a spoon. The register lay in the grass face down exactly as she had left it inside, edges damp with dew. She lifted it and found the page written with another hand over hers, a pale writing risen from the paper like hoarfrost. Present, wind. Present, 23. Absent, room. Neighbors walked the field and lost their words. No drag marks led away, no wheel ruts, no mischief of midnight horses. At the slope's foot, 2 parallel grooves curved toward nothing and quit, as if skids had tried a thought and set it down again. A primer opened itself a little farther each minute and refused to be closed. 2 slates stood upright in grass, propped by nothing, facing east like children who'd been told to mind the weather. The bells sounded once, a polite chime without clapper or beam to support it. Everyone turned and found nothing there to blame. By noon, talk had arranged itself into teams: cyclone, claim jumpers, rivermen with oxen, a prank too fine for any local boy. Amos, who had drawn a home and meant another, picked the poker up again and traced a rectangle in the ash. It kept trying to be a door. The county sent proofs instead of comfort. The surveyor arrived with tripod and chain, measured the absence to the inch, and wrote a legal description of nothing. Commencing at a cottonwood stump, thence north 66 feet, thence east 24, thence south 66 to point of beginning, improvements missing. The sheriff collected theories like taxes. He asked after rope, teams, quarrels. Nobody had new rope. The teams were branding south. Quarrels were the county's evergreen crop and none so tidy. Telegraphs went out from the railhead. School removed or lost stop request. Advise stop. The operator wrote removed, then under his breath added lost again because it felt more honest. The stove's warmth surrendered around mid-afternoon, leaving the iron ashamed of how long it had clung to the idea of fire. Eliza turned the register to a clean page and counted slowly, 23 names aloud so the air would know them. Between Ruth and Silas, a pale hand added a 24th. Letters raised like dew. Scholar, and then a mark like the tail of a Q. She shut the book and heard the bell reply from the empty sky, once, as if called. Out beyond the rise, a hayrick wore chalk. The day's copy sentence in Eliza's hand. Work learns its own alphabet, written backward as if a mirror had done its lesson. A barn door bore sums that added neatly until a final line balanced to nothing. At dusk, the pointer lay across the rolled maps, though Eliza had not brought it. It pointed southeast toward the river where the cottonwoods argue. That night, a light walked the fence again. It paused at the rise, passed through the absent wall with the patient gait of a lantern carried by someone who does not hurry, and went out where the blackboard should be. In the dark, the register breathed, a thin cool that made the palms damp the way a creek bank does. Somewhere near the cottonwoods, a page turned that nobody held. Visitors multiplied. An insurance man with a measuring rod, a deacon with scripture, a professor from the normal school who preferred devices. The professor set a photograph plate on the stove lid to warm, then took a picture of the absence. When he developed it at Mrs. Proctor's wash tub, the grass showed correctly and the foundation stones behaved, but a faint rectangle of pale hung where the walls had been, as if light had remembered their manners. He filed it under weather. The deacon read Exodus and pronounced the Lord mindful of houses. The insurance man asked about nails and was told cut square, not wire, which refused his favorite explanations. A red squirrel had stolen rope fibers for a nest and arranged them in a tidy loop. Eliza, who disliked omens, untied the loop and found it retied by supper. A child brought a slate home and woke to find it copied the next day's date by itself, slanting like a hand and not. Along the river bank, two shallow grooves ran together, separated and stopped where the willow roots begin. Between their ends, the ground showed the print of a desk foot. 3 screw scars, one missing, the floor it belonged to elsewhere. At the township meeting, the men argued whether to build new and charge the district, or wait in case the building had only stepped out and meant to return. While they argued, Mrs. Proctor's boy Amos stood outside with the pointer and held it against the grass, as if the world were a school map he could unroll. The stick swung of its own courtesy toward the cottonwoods again. From there, faint as chalk wiped twice, came the sound of recitation. The ABC said in the brave speed of children showing off. The deacon closed his Bible. The professor wrote, "Acoustic duct," and underlined it 3 times, until the underline looked like a little ladder that declined to climb anywhere. They sat watch by turns, because waiting becomes orderly when it lasts. Eliza took the midnight share, shawl over dress, hands full of register and pointer. At the cottonwoods, a strip of air felt colder than the air beside it, an upright band the width of a door. When she held the pointer across that space, its varnish smoked like breath in January, and came away with a smear of slate on the ferrule, though nothing had touched stone. The river kept its little argument with itself and declined to be helpful. At 1, the lesson began where no room stood. A voice of children, more like the sound of children's effort than any single throat, recited counties, then the 9 times table, then a sentence that had been the copy on Tuesday and never assigned. "Return what you borrow." The bell chimed, patient and small. Eliza called the roll aloud. Between Silas and Ruth, a pause answered. Between Amos and Mary, the register wrote a lifted word in pale. Here, she did not speak again for fear of wasting whatever mercy measured that attendance. In the grass, a chalk line drew itself and stopped, as if the board had accepted a word and waited for the next. The pointer tugged gently toward the cold band and then settled, obedient as a well-taught child who has decided against mischief. When the lesson ended, the river put its finger to its lips and the trees resumed being trees. The grass showed one new rectangle that would not mow evenly in summer. At dawn, she wrote in the register, "School absent, scholars present." The ink haloed the words as if laid on wet slate. Amos, yawning with the greatness of having been awake, added his doodle again, a box with a window and a smoke line, and drew beside it a smaller box inside the air. Newsprint learned the story faster than the county could. The Weekly Clarion printed a paragraph. "Schoolhouse gone, lessons continue." Between a notice for sorghum and an advertisement for sewing machines. A St. Louis sheet arrived asking for photographs of the absence. The professor mailed one and received a polite letter about fog effects and optics. A traveler swore he saw a small white building moving upriver on a sandbar like a beetle, and offered to sign an affidavit if someone would pay for his supper. The insurance man returned with newer forms and a face that believed in loss, but not in grammar. The district voted to build another box with a bell and a better stove. The hammering cheered and scolded the field in equal parts. On the day the new roof went on, boys dragged the creek and brought up the missing bell from a willow snag, its yoke wrapped with grass as neatly as twine. It rang once when nobody touched it and then settled into iron's long patience. Eliza hung it and did not write tomorrow's date in advance. She taught through harvest and snow. Some afternoons the old copy sentence would appear faint on the new board before anyone lifted chalk. Once the township map tacked to the wall shifted its small printed school icon her finger's width toward the river and then, shamed by attention, slid back. The register kept a clean hand for the living and a pale hand for what insisted on being noted: present wind, present bell, absent room. Eliza's own name appeared once in the faint writing with an underline that felt like goodbye. In spring, she married a widower who had 3 good chairs. She left the register in the desk drawer as if that could keep attendance honest. Now the prairie keeps its economies. Wheat hides the old stones most years. In drought, a rectangle of yellow returns, and the mower goes around it out of courtesy to memory. The new school is not new. It holds fluorescence, a furnace, lockers that smell like arithmetics and rain. In a glass case by the office sits the bell with a tag that wastes its nouns. Recovered, 1881, and the stove poker whose handle still carries the soot from no fire. The register rests 2 counties over in a museum that once was a bank. On cold days, a second hand rises under the ink, pale words that name weather and things, not people, and then sinks again as if paper refused to brag. Docents explain frontier volunteer labor, claim lines, the fight about taxes. Children on field trips press their palms to the glass and leave ovals the janitor wipes after closing. Sometimes a faint rectangle fogs from the inside, opposite their hand. In autumn, after a blue norther has made animals considerate, a thin recitation threads the cottonwoods at dusk. Counties, tables, the copy sentence done bravely. Wind says here for them and absent for wall. Farther down the river, the willow has grown through a hoop of iron and learned to ring when the air remembers. A girl walking home ahead of weather feels a cool band across her arm and looks around for a door that isn't there. Stand on the rise and count the windows of the present building. You will be right. Then you will count one more, not on the wall you are facing, but hanging briefly where sky keeps its ledger. No voices, only chalk in grass, paper learning to breathe, and a bell that minds its manners and rings once for those already present.